Hey y'all, it's Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis, and I'm here today with Francisco Miranda, and we are going to talk about Rupiculous Cattleyas, formerly known as Rupiculous Laelias. Some people call them Hoffman's Sigilla. There's also a genus in there called Dungsia, and we'll talk a little bit briefly about the taxonomy in a moment. But Francisco, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Good to see you too. I saw your little video on the Constantias. Looked like interesting.
Yeah,
We'll see
yeah,
how that goes on the long run.
yeah. I'm curious to see how that mount works, especially on that pot.
Yeah, the
And
only thing you have to keep in mind is that you see the granite is not porous, and the clay pots are. So you might have to water them a little bit more frequently than what you expect to see in nature. I
oh,
was
that's a
just
good.
thinking about that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Um, but that's a whole other conversation. So
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to not forget to tell you that.
yeah, yeah. Francisco, you've I've chatted with you a couple times already, but real quick, who are you and how do you know about Cattleyas?
Okay, well, I'm originally from Brazil. Um, I started my biology um, travel with marine biology, actually, and then I moved to botany when I started collecting and then studying orchids. That was a long time ago, last millennium, sometime in last millennium. But yeah, so then I went to live in the Amazon for 4 years, and there I started my master's degree in orchids. And then I came back in 85. That gives an idea how long ago was that. 85, I got back to Rio and I finished my master's degree there. In the Amazon, I started working with cataseedums because there are lots of cataseedums there. And when I moved back to Eastern Brazil in Rio de Janeiro, I actually changed my thesis subject to the section Cattleyas of the Brazilian lilies, which are the big lilies, the Purpurata, Crispa lobata tenebrosa, 9 species of that group. But that was just to test a little bit the taxonomic knowledge and just improve on that. Now, yeah, then I moved to the US in 1999. That's 26 years ago, next month. And from that point, we just started because he had a nursery in Brazil called Boa Vista Orchids, and he moved to the US and created, it was Orchidario Boa Vista, sorry, in Brazil. And then we moved to Boa Vista Orchids here. But because in Florida there was also a Buena Vista Orchids, and then there is another guy in Brazil which is Bella Vista Orchids. Then we decided to use Miranda Orchids to avoid any confusions.
That's actually
Essentially, that's
interesting
what
to
it is. I
note.
keep going to Brazil like twice a year to photograph plants in the wild and to bring shipments of Brazilian orchids.
And it's interesting you mentioned Boa Vista, just for everybody who has purchased plants from you. The invoice always says Boa Vista. So
Yeah,
now they know what that is.
yeah, exactly. Actually, a couple of people got surprised. Like, see, I got this bill from Miranda Orchids. From Boa Vista Orchids. You're supposed to be Miranda Orchids. So is this a scam? No. So now I have an extra DBA. So when I go to PayPal, it says Boa Vista Orchids, DBA, Miranda Orchids. So
Yeah, yeah.
avoid some paranoia that some people have about that.
And and what are some of the common species that you see and that people grow and are sort of circulating?
That's interesting because of the first species that appear, like Rupestre, Cilabarina, and Flava, they were coming from areas, because I have to remember that Brazil, the colonization of Brazil started on the coast. So the species that grow closer to the coast, and this is true for the Cattleyas too. Catawalkeriana was known way before Cattleya nobilis because it grows
Mm.
closer to the coast. As the development went inside the country, then you start finding different plants and different species. So, for example, Cattleya flava or Lela flava, which is not a good name, by the way, is actually crispata.
Mm. Hmm.
I already clarified that many years ago, but that's a different story. But this one grows close to Belo Horizonte, which is the capital city of Minas Gerais state. Okay, the route that the people went to go inside Brazil started in Rio, went to Belo Horizonte. This is the Diamond Trail and the gold trails in Brazil, and eventually went all the way to Diamantina. So see, they started from the coast, went to Belo Horizonte, and all the way to Diamantina. So the plants started to be found at the beginning. As you go more further inland, you start finding different species. Okay, so Clara flava was the first one going to Belo Horizonte, the first one to have yellow flowers. So collected plants, Clara flava. Of course, later on when I got to Diamantina, they found Briggerize there. And because at that point they didn't know there were so many species, they called it a rediscovery of Lala flava in
Oh,
Diamantina. So because you had yellow flower, you see yellow flower, flava, yellow flowers, whatever. Cinnabarina is growing in Rio de Janeiro state in the mountains. So they're the first one with the orange flowers to be found. And when they got close to Diamantina, they found lots of these plants growing on rocks that have purple flowers. So they literally called them Lila rupestris. So that's the story for those three. And essentially other species were being found. Henny found some, and he was a botanist in São Paulo. He started doing tours in trips inside Minas Gerais and different alternate routes, and started finding many other species. And the boom of description of species actually was with Guido Pabst, because actually Pabst was not the one going to the wild finding plants, but because he was describing lots of species, people that were collecting plants were sending the plants to him. So he described a lot of species like Angelari, Bradei, Zalkiana. I don't know if Zalkiana was not him, but several of the species. Okay. And now, because there are lots of roads going in the area, there are lots of new mountain ranges being found. So new species are being described a lot of times. But the problem is the differences are getting smaller and smaller between the species. So a lot of stuff that is being described, I actually think is the same thing, just variations.
And
So,
essentially, the rupiculous ones are they all in pretty much the same habitat?
yeah, they are more or less in the same general region. Let's put it this way. Except that we can talk a little bit about the ones that grow on trees now. Just to take this out of the way before I forget that. There are three species that grow on trees: Arpophylla, Cattleya, and Rupiculous. Okay. Arpophylla and Cattleya actually grow pretty close together in the Espírito Santo state in the mountains at about 3,000 feet elevation. And there are natural hybrids between them. The population is kind of mixed sometimes. And Rupiculous grows in the southern state of Bahia. In the rainforest there, slightly lower elevation, so it's a warmer grower plant. Okay, because they grow on trees, they develop a different habit. Because the plants need to get light, and the light is not so much available inside the forest like on the open rock fields. So the plants developed long pseudobulbs and longer leaves. Okay, but the flower spike got shorter because they don't need to. Many of for example, the orange Rupiculous or Cattleya, they develop very long flower spikes because the plants grow inside shrubs, and they have to show the plants to the flowers to the pollinators. So they evolved in a way that the flower spikes are long.
That's
so
like
you're not going to
Miranda.
Oh yeah, all of these. Arpophylla, sorry, no. Cinnabarina, Conagoi, which is the one I'm going to show you a little bit again. And all of the orange ones have long flower spikes. You're not going to find a small Rupiculous Cattleya with the orange flowers. There are none. The small ones are all yellow or purple.
Yeah.
Until somebody find one, and they never found one. Even I found some Angereris growing in full sunlight. The plants got much shorter, but the flower spikes are still long.
Still long.
Now, going back to the epiphytic ones. And yes, so those plants are growing inside the forest. They grow in more humid habitats. The pseudobulbs are thin, pencil-like, but very thin. They look like a big pleurothyllis in some cases. Okay, so these plants need more moisture and need to be cultivated under lower light conditions than the rock growing sunlight exposed ones.
Okay, and so the first two you mentioned,
Rupophylla
Carpophylla,
and Calcea.
and they're
Yeah.
they're a little higher up, so they're like intermediate temperatures, a
Yeah,
little
I'd say
better.
more intermediate, but I can grow them in Florida very well. I mean,
Hmm.
I actually grow them together with the others, which is kind of scary sometimes, but the plants got much shorter. But because they are grown from seed, they tend to adapt fast better than the ones, for example, when people used to collect the jungle plants, put them in full sunlight, they'll toast them all.
Yeah, yeah. So a little shadier, a little cooler,
Yeah.
and then the ones in the rock fields you mentioned, that's all kind of a similar
Oh,
habitat
yes,
type.
especially the small ones. You look at the small ones, the real small plants with short flower spikes, all of them grow the same way. They grow very, yeah, that one, actually, that one. The Cardemia grows a little bit sometimes on the sides of rock cliffs, vertical cliffs. So they sometimes got a little bit longer flower spikes. They are not that,
Okay.
they tend to be longer than that. And they're very thin flower spikes, they're very delicate and arching flower spikes.
Hmm.
Okay. But the ones that grow on full sunlight, like Ketiana, Longipes, also called Lucasiana, and Bradii, Exalchiana, Itambana, all these real short ones, Furneri, they have very short plants and very short flower spikes, and they grow in the highly exposed areas. Oh, excuse me. When you go to the orange ones grow in rocky areas too. However, they grow protected by shrubs. That's when you look at the orange ones, they're all bigger plants with longer flower spikes.
Yeah. Yeah, and so all of the sort of exposed ones, the ones you mentioned are going to grow in that sort of a little bit of sand on top of bedrock and just getting blasted by light with intermediate to warm
Yeah, some
temperatures.
exactly. Some of them grow on when you go more to the Diamantina area, you see Brigeris and Kleberis and Bradii. These grow in depressions of rock, but sometimes on cracks of the rocks too. And on the cracks, there's not much sand. It's more like a little bit of black soil there, which is similar to like peat moss that
Hmm.
accumulates inside those cracks. Sometimes, I mean, very little soil. When you see some of these, for example, the Lilliputianas, I mean, they grow in cracks like a quarter of an inch deep, because the plants are about 1 inch tall in the wild. So it's kind of
It's
amazing how they grow in a very little nutrient
it's a harsh environment.
availability.
They're
Oh,
adapted
yeah.
to that.
And actually, when I grow there, many of the species that flower in the spring, like Lilliputiana, for example, or Kleberi, they tend to bloom at the beginning of the rainy season because the rainy season, just keep in mind that the seasons are opposite in Brazil. So when we talk about September, October, we talk about the spring, not the fall. So I went last year to see the Lilliputianas, but the rains haven't started yet. The rains were late. So the plants look like dead. Well, you saw the
Mm.
nobilis. When the plants don't get any water for months, they look
Hmm.
like dead. And
Yeah.
I didn't see one in flower. I was expected to find all of them in flower early October. There were none in flower because they're waiting for the rains.
Mm.
Now, I hope this year or next year I'll be able to go there again and see I mean, next year and the next year. I hope to be able to go there again and see if they recover well from that drought, because the rainy season varies from year to year how early or late it comes.
And so how harsh is the dry season for them? Is it no rain? Is it a little bit of rain?
Okay, then we have to talk about the main climate on the full range of those Rupiculous plants. You see that in close to Belo Horizonte, in the mountains in the Belo Horizonte area, we are pretty close to the ocean. I mean, I'll talk about 300 miles, 200 to 300 miles in a straight line. But there is the cold fronts go to more, during a longer period of time, they hit those mountains. So there is a short, dry period, but it's not a very long dry period. I mean, not something like the Nobilis, for example. There are like 3-4 months that are dry, and they can be very dry.
Mm.
Okay, but the thing is that because we are so close to the ocean, usually we have, and especially in the higher mountains, and when I'm talking higher mountains, I'm talking about 4 to 5,000 feet elevation, because this
Mm.
is pretty higher mountains in Minas Gerais. You have dew point at night. So during most of the year, you have clouds forming on top of the mountains. So the plants get a lot of moisture at night. So the daytime is very dry, but during at night, usually they get some, excuse me, some moisture, sometimes 100% humidity at night. So those
Okay.
plants like, so you have to know which ones come. Most of the small purple ones come from that area. Okay. Then you go a little bit more north, you pass in the Sipor Mountains. Okay. And then you have different species there. We have Gilani, we have the Cardemia,
Hmm.
okay, and you have Blumenscheinii. Essentially, you have those three. I remember the first time I went to Sipor, I found some rupestris there, but I was looking lots of times after that, and I never found any rupestris anymore. I don't know what happened to them,
Hmm.
because this is the limit of the southern distribution range. Now, when you go after the Sipor, more of the cold fronts are blocked, and the Sipor starts having more of a longer dry season.
Hmm.
But then you get out of the Sipor and you get to the Diamantina region. You go down and up again. Now, then you're a good like 200 miles north, northwest of, or northeast, depending on the way you look at it, north of Belo Horizonte, and then you start having a very well marked dry season. So the dry season here is longer, about 6 months, okay, and it can be very dry, no dew point at night, okay. So for like 2-3 months, there's no 100% humidity at night. So humidity might increase a little bit, but not by much. And as a result, the species from there are adapted to much drier conditions, like Brigeri, Kleberi, and the rupestris. They can tolerate a lot of drought. Okay, they do in
Hmm.
nature. And it's the same thing. Brigeri's flower at the end of the dry season, beginning on the rainy season. So when you go there and the rain haven't started yet, the plants look like really dead, and some of them are flowering. But you go sometimes 1 week later, and the rains come. So the depressions of rock get completely covered with water, and you can see some plants growing from inside the water. And they stay like this for months until the end of the summer. So those plants need a lot of water in the growth season. That's good for all of them, and but they can benefit from a dry, cooler season.
Okay. Okay. So to summarize, they grow on rock fields with little to no soil or maybe a little bit of sand in the cracks, and they're at 3 to 5,000 feet. And so
Well,
they're
actually, there are a couple of species that grow up to 6,000 feet, which is a maximum elevation. They are 6,000 plus feet, like 6,500. In the Itambé Peak, you have, which is one of the highest mountains there in Minas Gerais, slightly over 2,000 meters, which is about 6,600 feet, something like that, 6, 7. Uh, the Itambanas, and you know the name Itambana because it comes from Itambé Peak, okay?
okay.
They grow up to the top of it, almost to the top of it. I would say 6,000 feet.
So that's
And in the
like the
Caraça,
coolest.
yeah, and the coolest section is the Caraça, because in the Caraça, there are two peaks that get to that kind of elevation too. Okay, and in one of them, I've never been to the other one, to the Sun Peak, Pico do Sol. I've never been there. I really want to go there. But when you go to the Inficionado, which is the other peak, which goes tops at 6,600 feet elevation, you see on top of there is Leleketiana,
Hmm.
Cattleyas, whatever. I mean, in flower, there they grow perfectly well there. And the temperature in the winter gets down to -7 Celsius, which is,
Oh
we're talking
wow.
about the 20s. They get frost frequently. So that one can take the cold.
But most of the ones that we grow are going to stay above
But
freezing.
they don't. They can take the cold, but they don't need the cold.
Yeah.
If you grow those plants between, I always say between 90 and 50, they will be just perfect. But in
Mhm.
some greenhouse, for like 3 months, the temperature goes to 110, and the plants are still growing happy because they have a lot of air circulation. They need a lot of wind. That happens
Yeah.
in nature. So I put lots of fans in the greenhouse. So even hot like that, but there's a lot of air circulation. They don't stay wet.
So for the rupiculous ones, they're growing in very bright sun, very shallow soil, intermediate for the most part. A few that like it a little cooler, but they can take
Yes,
heat.
yes, in nature, yeah, because it gets. Have to remember that the rock gets very hot during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's a little bit of sand there, see, the sand also gets hotter during the day.
That's
But there's
true.
a little bit
Yeah.
of organic matter. Some plants grow together with some little shrubs, a little bit of the side of shrubs that are more exposed areas, but it gets hot in there, yeah.
Hey, if you found this video at all helpful, please feel free to hit the thanks button down here at the bottom of the screen. Any contributions, like $1 or $2 even, would be super helpful in getting me to other cool places around the country so that I can film different shows or even back to Brazil. As always, thank you very much appreciated. And so if we sort of synthesize this sort of habitat and think about how we're going to adapt this to culture.
Mhm.
So what are some of the cultural tricks? Because I feel like a lot of people grow these and they seem to think they're difficult and hard to keep alive. I've been growing them for a little over a year now. I think they're bulletproof, but I also saw them in the wild, so I think that helps.
Yeah, I actually saw the other video that we mentioned. You also potted them on Shawiana, and this is the real Rupiculous one.
Yeah.
So I like the way you did it, but because I can do it that way, because first of all, because we hand water,
Mm.
and peat moss and sand don't like watering. I mean,
Yeah.
they just spill out of the pots, and also because I have to ship the plants, I can't ship them like this. Forget it.
Yeah.
So the way I do it, which I found out is very easy for me, it's like that. You see that? See, this plant is another Konagoi,
Hmm.
okay, growing a 2-inch pot with sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss is just perfect for commercial operation, short-term growing, for a couple of reasons. First of all, because it keeps the moisture there. You don't need to water the plants that frequently,
Mm.
okay? And you also can do that. Try ship a plant with bark or sand. I mean,
It would be a mess.
this this is just perfect. You see the
Yeah.
roots just go appear from the bottom of the pots. I mean, it's
Hmm.
just perfect. Okay, so I can do that very well. It works very well for me, and it's the same with that Konagoi that I showed you before. So this is in a 3-inch pot because you see that the plant is too big for a 2-inch pot. When I say too big for a 2-inch pot, is that the plant is actually longer than 2 inches. So if I put it in a 2-inch pot, I can do it, but one of the last bulb is going to be out of the pot already.
Yeah.
And again, with sphagnum moss, you see, and the plants do very well. You can actually take them out of the pots, and you see the root system
Hmm.
as good as it gets.
Yeah. New root tips going there too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The plant is growing, flowering perfectly, happy as a clam.
And so you can grow them in sphagnum long term.
Essentially, any type of medium that you're going to grow depends on essentially your watering schedule. So some people in Brazil use small pots in moss. Some people mix like a styrofoam little pieces to the moss to keep more aeration, or perlite, sponge rock, whatever.
Hmm.
Okay. And if you're going to use a pure sphagnum, the problem with pure sphagnum is that with the time it ends up drying out too much, start degrading, and start not holding as much water as before. I found out that actually the plants are better in old sphagnum
Hmm.
because it doesn't hold too much water. The recent sphagnum, I mean, recently potted, the plants just don't dry out
Yeah.
unless you don't water them for a week or so, and then they
Yeah.
dry out. But the older sphagnum, like the ones I've shown, like this, for example, this
Hmm.
sphagnum is about 1.5 years old. Okay,
Okay.
so that's what the plants seem to like more for my conditions here. Okay,
Yeah.
but regardless of you using bark or coconut fiber or the way you did it with the sand and peat moss. The thing is that those plants like to be pot bound. They have to be small pots. You cannot
Mm.
really. One can put it in bigger pots if the pots are really shallow, just to mimic what happens in nature. If you have a pot like it's 10 inches wide but half an inch deep, that's fine.
Yeah.
Don't
And,
know how you can have the drainage hose on that, but that's okay.
and I'll show everybody how I do it at home. You can see this is a small pot. Clay is what I like to use, and then about 90% sand with about 10% peat mixed in. And you can see this is a radii with a little flower spike starting there. and then these
And you
roots,
can
and
see that the plant is very happy.
yeah, this is one of yours that I got about a year ago.
Yeah, even though the roots are trying to go a lot out of the pots, that can be two things. One is that the plant is not getting enough water, so the plants are trying to get water somewhere else.
Yeah,
Or the plants are getting too much water and the roots are trying to avoid
they're
excessive
freaking
water.
out. Yeah,
But the plants are happy regardless. It doesn't make a difference.
and if I didn't have them growing in a cabinet, I would love to try in like a shallow dish, like you
Hmm.
said, so to let the roots kind of to let the roots spread out more. And I think what you can see is in nature, you can see these roots want to go, right? They want to go.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Yeah. Um,
But it's like everything. Cystinobilis is the same thing. I mean, the roots like to spread. They don't stay in one place. I mean, they really go long ways.
yeah, yeah. For captive plants, how bright do you grow them? So I know in nature, most of the rupiculous ones are just getting blasted with sun, very little shade.
Yeah,
Um,
but they have a lot of wind there too. So that's especially true for cooling the leaves. So my greenhouse is about 50% shade. So you also have to remember that in nature, if the plants grow together with shrubs or whatever, they give some dappled light or whatever.
mm,
Usually those shrubs get more open in the winter
mhm,
because there's less water and less light, so they lose a lot of the leaves, and so the plants get a lot more exposure in the fall and winter and early spring. In the summer, when it gets really warm, the shrubs are full of leaves and the trees are full of leaves. And this is true for the nobilis too, because you see, we saw the open trees of the nobilis. If you go there in the summer, in the rainy season, the trees are not open at all. I mean, it's lots of the canopy is completely grown. So the plants get a lot of shade when it's hotter.
yeah.
This seems to be kind of a rule for most places where orchids like to grow, at least in Brazil.
So you could grow them under lights like I do with fairly bright lights, or if you're
Oh
in a
yeah,
greenhouse, 50% shade in Florida seems to work well.
definitely.
So
The
they're
only thing with growing under lights, you just have to pay attention because those plants are not equatorial plants. They don't live in areas that has no seasonal variation.
yeah,
So you have to play with the length of the light exposure throughout the year if you want to have to grow them optimally. Otherwise, if you keep like for example, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, or 14 hours on and 10 hours off the whole year, you might have a problem flowering those plants because those
yeah.
plants need the stimulus of the colder temperatures. Another thing, when you go inside the house, you tend to have very controlled temperatures. So growing under lights inside the house is just perfect for Amazon plants. Cattleyas violacea, Eldorado, Lutella, they will like that, love this. But when you get to the plants that are not so equatorial, they might have a problem flowering.
And I
Just
want
a
to show everybody what I use. Actually, I'm looking at my phone here, and I use this Casa app, and it's a little timer that's like $12 for two of them, and you can program it with your phone to to have seasonal variation, and it there's an automatic setting that will automatically change to your local time when the sun comes up and when the sun comes down. So every day, you get that minute or two change, and it's Casa, it's Kasa is the one I use, but there's a bunch of different brands that people can use, and I'm trying to load it
Yeah, those
onto
things are
my.
amazing, really. Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it. That's the symbol. There you go. Casa, like I said, KASA is what I use, and to your point, it gives not only, before in the olden days when you had the little plug timer that you put in the wall, you would have to manually set it, and then it would change it at an hour every month.
Yeah, exactly, because it's impossible to go by the minute on those timers. Half
Yeah,
an hour, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, you can do it, but every click is 15 minutes anyway.
yeah.
You cannot go more precise than that.
And now it's changing it a minute or two every day for me, which is
That's
really
just
cool.
perfect.
All right, so we got bright light. We have a couple different media and potting types that we can use in captivity. Um, what about, let's talk about fertilizer, water, and temperature. Actually, you mentioned temperature. You said 90 to 50 is really the
And
optimum
under
range.
50, I would say it's an optimum range, but you have to let them get to 50. So if you're growing under lights, you have to find a way to I mean, 50s doesn't need to be exactly 50. You just don't keep the temperatures to like 72 degrees all year round because that's not going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, the plants are going to grow beautiful, but they're not going to flower.
Mhm. And so they need a little bit cooler night temperatures,
Yeah.
and but they're okay with some heat.
Oh, yeah.
And what about
Definitely.
water and fertilizer? You said they're seasonal in nature, the water, but how about in captivity?
Yeah, because you see, the thing with plants in our artificial conditions, see, for you to treat the plants like they should, you have to have the plants well established. The one I show you, you see, the one you have also lots of roots, so then you can make the plant get the plants dry a little bit. But if the plant is recent, not established yet, I would go with 1 year. You see, it depends on the time of the year you get the plants. If you get the plants in the fall, they're going to go through the winter, especially when you're growing outside in a greenhouse like I do. Probably most people in Texas do that too, because then you're subject to the natural light variation throughout the year.
Hmm.
Okay, shorter days or longer days, whatever. Okay, so shorter days are probably when the temperature is lower anyway. Okay, this time you can cut the water kind of drastically if the plants are well established. If the plants are not well established, just let them develop roots and just keep them like grow them like a regular Cattleya, no difference. Because actually, even for the regular Cattleyas, except for the ones in the Amazon, they respond well to variation, seasonal variation. So
Hmm.
less water in the winter, more water in the summer,
But
basically.
it doesn't have to be as harsh as like you were
No,
mentioning.
no, 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 no. You see, I always tell people the plants in the wild are survivors. That doesn't mean that they are happy there. If you go to you saw the Rubitos at the end of the dry season, the plants are not happy at all. I mean, the plants are like hope to make it to next week,
Yeah.
you know, because next week we're going to start having the rains.
Yeah.
Those Rupiculous ones is the same thing. I mean, when you go to see the natural habitat when the rains are not there yet, geez, the plants are looking like really dehydrated, really
Hmm.
close to death.
Okay. And then what about fertilizer? Is there have you noticed any
Well,
tricks?
fertilizer is something that you do out completely artificially, except in your case because using peat moss, which is okay. Peat moss is actually a fertilizer because
Yeah.
that is decaying matter. So I sometimes when people grow them, try to grow them in gravel or sand, I always suggest to use peat moss because when you're watering them, the peat moss kind of drips inside the sand. It kind of goes down there, especially when you use gravel, it goes down real quickly.
Hmm.
Okay? And you just fertilize them with more peat moss. When you see the peat moss is disappearing, just put some more on top.
Yeah.
The peat moss, you can use slow release fertilizer for that too. And if you're going to fertilizer, like I do with everything, because I grow them together with the other Cattleyas, it's just seasonal stuff, regular concentration throughout spring and summer, and start cutting in the fall. And in the winter, just fertilizer once every 2 weeks and a quarter concentration, something like this. It's just maintenance, basically.
So
I
very
guess the only
weak
thing,
fertilizer.
yeah, definitely. And especially when the plants start growing, which is usually spring and summer, when the new growths are developing, that's when they need a lot of water and a lot of fertilizer. But you have to remember that even when I say lots of fertilizer for this kind of plants, these are not cymbidiums. They're not really heavy feeders. I mean, they are still very slow growing plants.
Yeah.
The only thing I wouldn't recommend is to put peat moss on top of sphagnum because then is moisture on top of moisture. You're going to start having more organic matter decay. The sphagnum is going to decay much faster if you
Yeah.
put sphagnum moss. I mean, peat moss on top of the sphagnum.
Okay. Is there anything else on culture before we wrap it up?
Let's see. You said pot, media, light, water, temperature, fertilizer. Yeah, we talked about all of them. Why so many people consider them to be difficult to grow? Because you kind of have to respect the growth, the seasonal growth.
Mm,
Essentially, it's that. And people sometimes put them in pots that are too big. They just don't dry out, and the roots tend to rot. They don't like that because you saw the plants in the wild. There's very little organic matter there. So
yeah.
the plants are very thrifty in terms of feeding, and they are very slow growers because of that. I mean, the limitation in the habitat forced them to be slow growers anyway.
Okay.
There's nobody fertilizing them there. I mean, it's just that In the summer, there's more temperatures higher. There's more wind, more rain. It washes out more organic matter to the plants. Essentially, that's what it is.
And where we buy them? Obviously, Miranda Orchids
Yeah,
is
I try to bring as many as I can from there, but because I go only twice a year, and not all species are available all the time. We're growing some here, so the Konagoy is actually our production here. So we try to make as many seed pods as we can. And a few species we already produce. We produce Angerelli, we produce Cinnamarinas, we produce Konagoy that I mentioned, Rupestris.
Mhm.
Some of them are very easy to grow from seed under artificial conditions. The problem is the ones that are very small plants and very small flowers. Sometimes you need kind of a microscope to see the pollinia, actually.
Oh yeah.
It's very difficult to pollinate those little things. Yeah, that is one of them, yeah.
I cannot imagine pollinating that.
Yeah, well, you have to get a little toothpick and you have to use a lot of magnification to be able to see that stuff, you know?
Yeah. And I have purchased some from actually Florale is this one.
Yeah.
And then is there anyone else in the US that you know of? I think it's just the two
Uh,
y'all.
no, Florida comes to many of the shows here, so they come from Miami, Redlands, and essentially it's about the same time I bring plants. But because they are a Brazilian company, they can always, all year round, they can look for different plants. You see, I go there twice a year, so I pretty much know some people that produce them, but I don't know others. So
Yeah.
I bring what I find, and
Yeah.
they can bring more variety. So
But essentially, as far as I can tell, it's just the two of
yeah,
you
it's
that are bringing
essentially
them
the two
in.
of us. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, bringing plants. Yeah,
Cool.
and growing some here in the lab, and essentially that.
Yeah. Well, Francisco, I appreciate you talking about this and sort of creating a care guide for the Rupiculous Cattleya, Hoffman Sigilla, Lelea, whatever we're gonna call them.
Whatever you call them,
Not
as long as you
Dungsia.
know what you're talking about, it's fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, let's see
Bye.
you. Talk to you later. Yeah, actually, I have a problem calling them Rupiculous Cattleya. Now, that's a. Let's go back a little bit on to talk a little bit about taxonomy in general.
Mm,
You see, the taxonomy actually is a system created for us to divide and conquer the world that we live in, which means we create artificial separations based on some characters that might not be phylogenetic, okay, to make our life easier to understand. And then you see, I'm kind of going to put together the three first items that you put on taxonomy and talk about everything at once.
yeah,
Okay, that goes with the background of the Rupiculous Laelas or Rupiculous Cattleya, as some people call them. In the US, most people call them, but in Brazil, they don't. But anyway, uh, those plants started in the 19th century when lots of shipments started going to Europe. And John Lindley at the time that created the genus Cattleya, based on Cattleya labiata, which is one of the big Cattleyas. He started getting some of these plants and started describing them. And it's interesting because when you look at the three first Rupiculous Cattleya or Cattleyas that they were described based on color. Was Lely cinnabarina, because it has cinnabar-colored, orange-colored flowers. Then you have Lella flava, which is a yellow flowered species. And then you have Lella rupestris, because he found out that people told him that these plants grow on rocks. Okay, so now all the three names are completely superfluous these days because you have like 30 species with yellow flowers, you have like more than 10 with orange flowers, and most of them are rupestris, rupiculous anyway. So some of the old names are kind of meaningless if you just look at some of the basic features. So taxonomy evolved for us to look into other different characters. But essentially what separated the Cattleyas from the Lelias in the beginning is a number of pollinia. So because Cattleyas have 4 and Lelias have 8. So this is a practical system that works even today because all of those Rupiculous Cattleya or Lelias have 8 pollinia, and all the real Cattleyas, let's put it this way, have 4 pollinia. And actually, if you start calling all these things Rupiculous Cattleyas, it started making a little bit of a confusion because there is a real Cattleya, which is Rupiculous too, which is Cattleya longata, only grow on rocks. And that is not part of that group.
Huh.
So that actually, instead of making things easier, makes it a little bit more complicated. The thing is that more recently, with a lot of studies, not just with DNA, but it started with chromosomes and then with phytotaxonomy decades ago, and more recently with chromosomes, we try to apply systematics to taxonomy. And that's why all these names keep changing, okay? It's not just that we separated the groups into subgroups or whatever. It's just that because people try to apply systematics to taxonomy. But coming back to that group, let's go a little bit back in time. And Lindley only have two different groups of Laelias. Was the parviflora, okay, the small flowers, and the big flowered ones. So all this so-called Rupiculous Laelias or Cattleyas these days, they are part of this parviflora group, okay? Now, in the beginning of last century, Rudolf Schlechter, which was a very good observer of things, one of the best taxonomists ever, he separated all the Laelias, except the genus Laelia by then, into 7 sections. 3 of those sections were Mexican, and 4 of those sections were Brazilian. And those 4 sections are actually 4 very separate groups. You can tell them apart very easily. He had 4 sections which were Cattleyas, which is the big Laelias, the 9 species. Then you have the Hydrolaelias, which is a group of 6 species, which includes Pumila praesens diana, Jongiana, Aloe, and Syncorona. And then you have the parviflora, which are the Rupiculous Laelias, that has these days more than 60 species, accepted species. And the 4th group is just 1 species, which is Laelia lundii. So these are the 4 Brazilian groups. The thing is that with all these name changes, sometimes things get confusing because we can keep the species name for most of them when you change, for example, from Laelia to Cattleya. Okay, but a couple of species you can do that because you already have priority species names in Cattleya. So Laelia diana, for example, you cannot change it to Cattleya diana, even though we have that reflex of calling Cattleya diana, but you can't do that because there's already a Cattleya diana described before that, which is described as a species, but it's actually a hybrid. So it has to be renamed to Cattleya bicayoi. Come on. This is a bad name, and nobody knows what a Cattleya bicayoi is. It is. Everybody knows Laelia diana. So that brings us to another thing that we're talking horticulture here and not taxonomy. It's not botany, really. So I like to call the species the names that people know them. But it's a different discussion. But anyway, what happens in the US about Hoffmann-Segella? Hoffmann-Segella was described by Jones in the Caribbean. I don't know why somebody in the Caribbean is going to work with Brazilian orchids, but he created a name, and he moved several of those Rupiculous Laelias to that group. So the tendency in Brazil now actually is to accept the Brazilian Laelias, in parentheses, okay, as 4 different genera. So we have the genus Brasilelia, which I hate that, but the thing is that it has its priorities. Then you have the section Hydrolalia from Schlechter was upgraded to the genus Hydrolalia. The section parviflora from Schlechter was, because you couldn't use parviflora as a genus because Lindley already did that, so Hoffmann-Segella was accepted as the Rupiculous Laelias, and Lundia is a microlaelia, which is section microlaelia from Schlechter, it's called the microlaelia. Okay, so just the only thing I want to tell is that we cannot really say that some groups will call that, and now it's called that. It's called that by some people. See, taxonomy is very personal. So a lot of people look at things differently. So the American Orchid Society, for example, follows RHS, which happens to follow Cassio van den Berg's classification because he worked there He got his master's degree, postdoctorate and postdoctorate at Q. And so they tend to use the classification of one of theirs. But if you go, for example, to Brazil, nobody that I know, except Cássio, except calling these Brazilian layers as Cattleyas. It's just it doesn't really make a difference for us today, but it's just want to put this in perspective.
Yeah, and just to summarize, they were originally called Laelia, and then they were switched by Cassio to Cattleya, but then they were also
not just that. We jumped one step here. First, Cassio changed everything to Sophronides.
Oh, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And that kind of proves that it doesn't make sense, this kind of classification sometimes, because all the Sophronides are now Cattleyas. So what you did, you just give a lot of work for AOS people and RHS people to change all those damn names, especially in the hybrids. You see, the thing is that you have the groups. The groups are clearly defined. Now, if you're going to consider them all as one genus or several different genera, this is personal opinion. Always going to be. See, people think that DNA gives all the answers. It doesn't, because DNA just gives you more information for you to use your personal opinion that limits the groups. That's going to always be like that. There is no silver bullet. It's always personal opinion on the person that has more prestige at the time.
And your personal opinion is that Hoffmann-Segele is correct for the group of
yes, I accept them as separate genera. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But that's okay. I'm not going to call them Hoffmann-Segeles today because it makes no sense. It looks like we're talking about two different things at the same time. And let me just give you one final thought about that, because you mentioned that. Dungsia. What is Dungsia? It's a very appropriate name, because it's a pile of, just take out the I and A and you know what it is. And you know why? Because Vittorino Pavacastro, and they decided to separate the genus Dungsia for the plants that are not rupiculous. They actually grow on trees. We're going to talk about them a little bit in the future, later on. And come on, if we're going to separate plants by the habit, if they grow on trees or not, then you're going to have, for example, Cattleya purpurata, you have 3 different species, because some of them grow on rocks, some of them grow on trees, some of them grow on the beach. So, by habit, you cannot separate that. But that's not the problem. The problem is there was another feature used to separate Dungsia from Hoffmann-Segele. That's what he did. He said that the Dungsias don't have a flower sheath. The last time I looked, my Laelia profile, I have a flower sheath like 2.5 inches long.
Yeah, I can look at mine too, and I can see sheaths. Yeah.
Yes, this is not just a matter of opinion. This is just plain wrong. I mean, it's just like you look at the plant, it's like you're saying that these things don't have leaves. It's just roots and bulbs. Come on. We have to remember that a lot of these people are not taxonomists. That they're not actually trained to see real differences in flowers or in plants. Okay. But because of that, because I don't accept that a plant, just because it grows on trees, is a different genus. Like oncidiums. There are oncidiums growing on rocks, trees, whatever. You're not going to call them different because they grow on rocks or trees.
Yeah, we have Cattleya walking around and it grows on trees, and then sometimes it grows
exactly the same thing. Walkeriana, Nobelius, so whatever. Yeah. And but saying something like this, that a plant doesn't have a flower sheath, come on, this is wrong for the 8 billion population of the world to see, because I see the sheath, I'm looking at it. There's a sheath there. And it's not a small one, a residual one is a big one. So that's wrong. So that Dungsia for me is just that without the I and A. Yeah.